I was 28 years old, solo camping in a nearby forest with my beagle Cooper, only to realize I wasn't as alone as I thought. It was November, and the weather was still moderately warm during the day, but it got cold at night, so I came prepared. I brought my portable fire pit, the kind with mesh netting at the base to let air pass through, and a couple of bundles of firewood from the gas station. I made sure to let my wife and a few friends know where I was camping. We had just had a child, and I needed a couple of nights to myself to relax and gather my thoughts. I had never done anything like this before, so it was completely out of my comfort zone, but I had my tent, firewood, portable heater, and a few days' worth of food and drinks. So as far as I was concerned, I was set. I set up camp far from any trails and well out of sight of the main road. I let Cooper off his leash to roam around, and he seemed to love it. He was so curious, running all over, sniffing everything. He's my best friend, and has been since I got him as a puppy. I stayed fairly close to camp that first day, as I was still getting a feel for the area and didn't want to risk getting lost. Cooper and I went on a small hike not far from camp, and we spent the rest of the day relaxing around the fire. The next morning, I took Cooper on a longer hike, exploring further away from camp. Everything was great, and I was having an amazing time. On the second night, I heard noises outside my tent. Cooper was asleep, but he woke up when I did. I thought maybe it was a deer or another small animal. I shone my flashlight around, but I didn't see anything. I lay back down, but Cooper stayed awake, alert. I couldn't get back to sleep, and I felt uneasy. Cooper was growling softly. I heard a twig snap and shone my flashlight again. This time, I saw a figure in the distance, moving quickly through the trees. My heart raced. I grabbed Cooper and held him close. I whispered, "It's okay, buddy." But I wasn't sure it was. The next day, I decided to pack up and leave. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As I was packing, Cooper started barking. I looked up and saw a man standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me. He didn't say anything, just stood there. I called out, "Can I help you?" He didn't respond. I hurried to finish packing and kept an eye on him. He eventually turned and walked away, but I didn't feel safe until I was back in my car, driving away. The experience left me shaken. I haven't been solo camping since. I still love the outdoors, but I'm more cautious now. Cooper and I stick to well-traveled trails and campgrounds, and I always let someone know exactly where I'll be. I learned that it's important to trust your instincts, and that it's better to be safe than sorry. This occurred when I was 20, and now at 22, it still feels recent. While attending college, I worked as a babysitter for one family during the weekdays and occasionally as a nanny for a wealthier family on weekends. The affluent family often traveled over weekends, leaving their 2 children with me. I would stay at their residence for the weekend. They had a guest bedroom specifically for me, and the family was incredibly kind, making it an enjoyable arrangement while it lasted. It happened during autumn, with leaves falling and a chill in the air. I arrived at their house on a Friday, and that night was uneventful. I just played with the 2 kids, who I'll call John and Janine. John was 7, and Janine was 5. They were adorable and well-mannered. Janine's bedtime was 7:30, and John's was 8:30. During the day, I'd play with them in their respective toy rooms. Janine loved her dolls and dollhouses, and I spent a lot of time playing with her. John loved his video games, so I'd watch him play. The kids had everything they could wish for, and the house was magnificent. It was a sprawling property with a large pond at its center. There was a separate 3-car garage and a pool with a pool house across the pond, which also served as a bar and recreation room with a pool table, darts, arcade games, a huge TV, and multiple sofas. The family was so affluent that they even had an intercom system connecting the pool house to the main house. If you pressed a button on the wall in either location, it would ring, and you could communicate through it. The pool house also had a giant window overlooking the pond with a view of the house. After the kids went to bed, I had the night to myself. It was fantastic. I wasn't allowed to have friends over, which was a rule I respected. I would just FaceTime my friends and watch movies in the pool house to pass the time. It was a great place to have some free time. Feeling hungry, I walked back to the house, entered the code to get in, and went to the kitchen. They had an abundance of snacks and food I was allowed to help myself to. I grabbed a frozen snack from the freezer and microwaved it. Once it was ready, I returned to the pool house. I preferred hanging out there because I could be louder on the phone and have the TV volume high without waking the kids. I was on the couch eating, watching the movie White Chicks, and texting several of my friends. I was just telling them how great this job was when the intercom beeped, startling me. I answered it and heard Janine's voice saying she was scared because she kept hearing noises. She usually slept through the night, so I had to go tuck her back in. I set my food down and rushed back to the house. I entered the code again and went to Janine's room. She must have run straight back to bed after we got off the intercom because she was already in bed, looking frightened. I comforted her, tickled her a bit, and tucked her in to make her feel safe. Once she was calm, I left her room, closed the door, and headed to the kitchen for some wine. As I searched for a wine opener, I heard a faint creak from another room. I froze and instinctively looked in that direction, waiting for another sound. I didn't want to scare myself unnecessarily and thought it might just be the house settling. Although I was a bit uneasy, I decided to head back to the pool house since I had left the lights and TV on. I went outside, locked the door with the code, and hurried back to the pool house. I sat back down on the couch and resumed eating. I didn't end up bringing the wine. White Chicks was still on, but I was mostly distracted by my phone. Then the intercom went off again, making me jump. I hurried to answer it, and this time there was silence on the other end. "Janine," I said into the mic. I thought I heard someone breathing, but that was all. I called out both Janine's and John's names at least 3 times each. Now, I was genuinely scared. I called my friend Kaylee and asked her to come over because I was really frightened. I explained that Janine had said she was hearing noises. Then I heard a noise, and now someone had pressed the intercom button but didn't say anything. It didn't seem like something the kids would do. I was still on the phone with Kaylee, who sounded drunk and was telling me to stop being paranoid. While talking, I kept looking out the window at the house. The hallway lights turned on. I told Kaylee, and any chance that it was one of the kids vanished when a large figure stepped into view in one of the hallway windows. I screamed and dropped the phone as I saw a grown man looking back at me. I realized the intercom was still on this entire time. I picked up my phone, hung up on Kaylee, and called 911. I was crying, screaming into the intercom that I was calling 911 and to leave us alone. I was basically shouting everything I said to the police into the intercom. I looked back at the window, but the man was no longer there. I was hysterical, begging the 911 operator to hurry. She kept telling me to calm down and ask me a million questions. I kept shouting the address into the phone, pleading for them to hurry. When she asked if the kids were safe, I screamed, "No, they're still in the house with that man." That's when I heard Janine scream through the intercom, and I completely broke down, falling to my knees, crying. The 911 operator was still trying to keep me calm, but I couldn't. I said, "I don't know what to do." And she said, "The police are almost there. You need to wait." I replied, "He has the kids," and she asked if I saw any weapons on the man. I said I couldn't tell, but then I heard Janine's voice on the intercom, saying my name. I went over and shouted, "Yes, I'm here. Get your brother and get out of the house." She was crying, saying there was a man in there. I said, "Yes, I know. Just get your brother and come outside now." It was the bravest thing I had ever done, running outside back across the yard to the house and meeting the 2 kids who were already at the door. I grabbed both of them and led them back to the pool house, where we hid with the lights off. Both of them were crying, and I still wanted to cry as well, but I had to be strong and keep it together for them. I was still on the phone with 911, and she eventually told me that the police were there and would come meet us at the pool house. Those words were the most comforting words I'd ever heard. The flashlights of the police shone through the windows. I led the kids to the door where we met a couple of officers. The female cop took the kids to one car, and I went with another officer to another car. There were already 3 police cars in front of the house, and more kept arriving. I answered all the questions I was asked, and then they found him. They brought out a man who looked to be around 6 feet tall. He looked at everyone as he was brought out in handcuffs and put in the back of a car. I still remember his face as he looked at me. He looked like the product of incest. His face was distorted. Janine and John's parents were notified immediately and made aware of the situation. There was no way any of us were staying there that night. The parents arranged for the kids' aunt to pick them up to stay with her, and I guess she called out of work the next day. I went home after they didn't need me anymore, but I didn't sleep that night. I was still in shock, running on leftover adrenaline. The parents understandably didn't leave their kids alone for a long time after that, and I'm sure they pressed charges to the fullest extent. With their resources, I hope that creep got what he deserved and more. I respectfully told them I couldn't stay there anymore because I was haunted by that night. I can only imagine how scarred those poor kids were, and maybe still are. There was a house nearby known as the Ghost House because its construction was never completed. It had been sitting abandoned and unfinished for years. The house was on a sketchy block with many homes that seemed either deserted or poorly maintained, with overgrown grass and weeds everywhere. One evening, my friends Jenny, Luca, Kylie, and I were bored and cruising around town. After grabbing some fast food, Luca suggested we explore the ghost house. The girls agreed, so naturally, I did too. We parked a few houses down. This street only had one streetlight. The rest of it was dark, and many of the houses had no lights on. It was a dark and eerie block, as I mentioned. The neighboring houses seemed deserted too, even though some had cars in the driveways. We made sure to be extra quiet as we got out of the car and walked over to the ghost house. Seeing this unfinished 2-story house in the dead of night was definitely spooky. Next, we had to find a way in. We tried the front door, but it was locked. We then walked around the house, testing every window until one of them slid right open. Jenny, being the smallest, climbed in through the window and unlocked the back door for us. It was already unlocked, meaning anyone could have just walked right in. We entered the house, which reeked of a mix of wood and some kind of rotten cat urine. The first floor was more finished than I expected and quite spacious with many rooms, but there was no furniture. We all split up and went different ways. I went up the stairs to the second floor, which was more unfinished, with a lot of the wall framing exposed. I heard rustling from downstairs, the sounds of my friends being a bit too loud, so I went back downstairs. The upper floor was pretty empty, so I went back down and ran into Jenny. She asked what was upstairs. I said it was a bit unfinished up there, but she went to check it out anyway. I continued to look for the basement and found it beyond a brown door right under the stairs leading upstairs. As soon as I opened it, I got a whiff of that cat urine smell again. I started walking down the steps, and as I reached the bottom, I saw the basement looked more decrepit than the rest of the house. The concrete floor was stained with some brownish, rusty-looking substance. My first instinct was to think paint, but the color could also resemble blood. I looked around the mostly empty space and found a small wooden chair and a little table with a book on it in one corner. It was the Holy Bible. I heard footsteps coming down the steps and said in a volume slightly above a whisper, "Yo, come check this out." When I heard no response, I turned around but didn't see anyone by the stairs. I said, "Who's there?" Then I noticed a girl sitting down, leaning on the wall. It took me a second to realize it wasn't Jenny or Kylie. It was some random woman with extremely long and messy hair, staring right at me. Then I heard one of the girls upstairs screaming, followed by Luca calling my name, saying, "Let's get out of here." The only words I could muster up were, "Holy," and I ran out of the basement and up the stairs. I saw my friends running out through the back door. I had no idea what they had seen, but I was right behind them. We ran back out front towards the car and didn't stop until we were inside. I asked them as we started to drive away what they saw, because I had seen some deranged-looking woman come down to the basement. Everyone was talking over each other, but one of the girls finally managed to explain that they saw 2 men standing in one of the empty rooms on the first floor. They saw some dark objects on the floor in that room, but couldn't figure out what they were in those brief seconds before running away. They didn't get a look at their faces, but they were men based on their silhouettes. I don't know what the hell was going on in that house, whether we encountered some satanic cult or just some homeless people. You couldn't pay me to ever go back to that house again.